Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Ogbanje Joseph. Please subscribe to this channel, share, like, as well as drop a comment on the comment section. So, today, our lecture is titled Housing Development Planning in Nigeria. Housing Development Planning in Nigeria. Now, housing is a crucial basic need of every human being, just as food and clothing. It is very fundamental to the welfare, survival, and health of a man. Hence, housing is one of the best indicators of a person's standard of living and his place in the society. The location and type of housing can determine or affect the status of man in the society. Now, shelter is central to the existence of man. Now, housing involves access to land, shelter, and the necessary amenities to make the shelter functional, convenient, aesthetically pleasing, safe, and hygienic. Hence, unsanitary, unhygienic, unsafe, and inadequate housing can affect the security, physical health, and privacy of a man. Okay, invariably, the performance of the housing sector is one of the yardsticks by which the health of a nation is measured. According to WHO, according to World Health Organization 1961, a good housing should have the following items. Number one is a good roof to keep out the rain. Number two, good walls and doors to protect against bad weather and to keep out animals. Number three, sunshades all around the house to protect it, from direct sunlight in hot weather. Number four, the next one is, of course, wire nettings at windows and doors to keep out insects like house flies and mosquitoes. In essence, housing quality can be judged from the physical appearance of the building, of the buildings, facilities provided, quality of wall used in the building construction, eminence of the roofing materials, condition of the house. Okay, now, hence, the inadequacy of housing in terms of quality and quantity results in poor standard of the environment. Okay, housing is a product and a process. Housing is, as a product. Now, as a product, housing refers to the end product of the construction work in terms of the structure, design, space, lighting, heating, sanitary facilities, as well as other conveniences. On the other hand, as a process, housing involves the construction, neighborhood planning, urban and regional planning, as well as environmental management. Okay, so that is actually what we have. But there are problems with housing in Nigeria. Okay, there are problems with housing in Nigeria. And what are these problems of housing in Nigeria? Now, housing problems abound in Nigeria, both in rural areas and urban centers. Now, the problem in the rural areas has to do with qualitative housing. Okay, while the problem in the urban centers is quantitative in nature. Housing problem in the rural areas are connected with qualitative deficiencies like place, degree of goodness, and the value of the house. Now, the rural housing is incomplete because social services cannot be adequately linked with them. The social services required with housing include electricity, water supply, as well as transportation facilities. All these are deficient in rural housing. On the other hand, Urban housing problem include homelessness, you know, homelessness, slum dwelling, squatting, and of course, overcrowding. Now, high rate of urbanization, ever increasing population of urban dwellers, in conjunction with the increasing, social expectations of the people, are all responsible for housing problems in Nigeria. Okay, now let us look at the housing policy. Now, a policy is a statement on paper by the government on an established, on an establishment. Okay, now let me still take it again, that a policy is a statement on paper by the government or an establishment as regards the way and manner in which identified problems are to be solved. Okay, now to this end, different sectors of the economy have policies that are used in tackling peculiar problems. Hence, the housing policy is a tool that is used in town planning for solving housing problems and consequently for achievement of sustainable housing. Town planning itself focuses on spatial arrangement of urban and rural land uses for the purpose of creating orderly, economical, functionally efficient, and aesthetically pleasing physical environment for what? For living, working, creation, and what? Recreation and circulation. Now, in line with the town planning procedures, the housing policy recognized the fact that inadequate housing constitutes a major problem in Nigeria. Okay, now inadequacies are both qualitative, principally in the rural areas, and quantitative in the urban areas. Okay, now consequences are that the formation of poor quality of environment, as well as depreciation of human health. Now, a housing policy is derived from laws, regulations, and administrative practices that can aid the production and delivery of what? Of housing. Furthermore, the fundamental principles of freedom, justice, equity, authority, and public interest were taken into consideration in the formation of the 1991 housing policy. Now, the policy is a measure aimed purposely at, at solving the housing problems in Nigeria. Okay, but like other policies, it has its specific goals and how they can be achieved. Now, in this regard, the main goal of the national housing policy is to make decent shelter available and affordable to all Nigerians. The policy addressed fundamental issues like land ownership, housing finance, housing construction, and delivery. Above all housing policy, okay, a housing policy requires a strategy for the enforcement of the purpose of the intended program of action. Now, most comprehensive action, a most comprehensive housing policy should address, the role of government, which may vary from the planning and control of all aspects of housing, production, land investment, construction, and of course, occupancy, to intervention only at certain levels or when solutions are needed to specific problems involving such matters as land use plans and controls, credit and financial aids, subsidies to low income groups, rent control, slums, slum clearance, and of course relocation. Okay, now those are the things. Now, but what is actually the appraisal of the housing policy in Nigeria? Now, the appraisal or criticism of government can be measured with the level of implementation and effectiveness of of policies. As such, the goal and objectives of policies are exposed through public policy. Now, to this end, several authors have appraised the performance of the Nigerian housing policy. Okay, now we have Lawal, we have Fadamiro, we have Jinaidu, we have Ogu and Ogbozabi, and many of them, all of them have actually argued that the policy provides the foundation upon which actions are based. Now, for instance, the policy addressed vital issues in housing provision like prototype design, urban housing, rural housing, access to land, affordable housing costs, the use of local materials with consideration for climate and culture, as well as the preference of the users. Okay, but one thing we must understand very quickly is that having actually put all of these things together, there's something that is actually missing. Okay, look at what happened. That the housing policy also takes into consideration other vital issues like health, finance, cooperative, provision of infrastructure, building materials with emphasis on local building materials and all of that, periodic maintenance and repair, as well as the reform of the policy. Now, the policy empowered the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria to provide loan for housing research, construction and delivery. Now, the Nigerian Building and Research Institute was also empowered to make adequate research into housing construction and delivery in Nigeria. Also, the Standard Organization of Nigeria was bestowed with the responsibility of ensuring the delivery of standard materials and buildings, and of course, other organizations were facilitated, including the Real Estate Development Association of Nigeria and the Building Materials Producers Association of Nigeria. Now, but what is important? What is important is that now the efforts of government in terms of formulation and implementation of national housing policy is quite commendable. But on the other hand, all those efforts have not shown remarkable improvement in the status quo, since many Nigerians are still homeless, while up till this time, many are living in dingy and ramshackle structures. Another major criticism of the policy lies in the area of monitoring, evaluation, and review. Now, adequate mechanisms are not put in place, for the appraisal of the policy and housing sector as a whole. Now, in as much as the housing policy that has actually been put in place by government is actually very commendable, there are certain loopholes that government needs to actually look into, which are the things I just talked about just now. Thank you very much.